Hey friends, Deanna here with Homestead and Chill, and today I'm here to show you yet another style of drip irrigation system. If you haven't gathered already, we're really big fans of drip irrigation here at Homestead and Chill. It saves time, money, energy, water, and they're really actually a lot easier to set up than most people think, especially today's system that I'm going to show you. You don't need any kind of plumbing skills, and it actually connects right to a hose bib or a nearby spigot. And so even though I'm showing today's video on grow bags, this is actually perfectly applied for and works in standard raised garden beds of various shapes and sizes. So if you've tuned into our channel before, you might have seen our other drip irrigation video where I set up drip for our main raised bed garden area, where I used drip tape and hooked into our PVC hard lines and plumbing, use control valves and a solar timer and all that kind of stuff. And this system is far more simple and straightforward to set up. And it's also less permanent in nature. You can leave it hooked up permanently, which is what we're going to be doing, but it's also a really great option for folks where you have, freezing conditions in the winter where you may want to take your whole irrigation system apart and store it for the winter. And in case you're wondering what this space is, we basically call this our calendula farm. So when we first moved to this homestead almost 2 years ago now, we just needed to get calendula growing as quickly as possible. We infused the flowers into healing body salves and face oils that we sell in our shop, also with chamomile, which is growing here now as well. So we just needed to get things planted. And so we kind of set this up as what was supposed to be a temporary solution and a quick way to get growing. And it's just kind of expanded with time. So we only had 4 grow bags at first that we were watering with some soaker hoses. It was easy enough to, switch the hose around to irrigate those this way. But this year we just added 5 more grow bags for this total of 9. So we just wanted to get a really efficient, DIY irrigation system set up to water the space for us. So in this video, I will walk you through the step-by-step process and all the parts you need to get this system set up and going. I'll also make a written blog article if you want to follow in written form and with step-by-step photos as well. And I'll link that in the caption. Otherwise, let's get going and set this up. Okay, so here are all the supplies and materials that we're going to use for this project. And just like to note, we get almost everything from Drip Depot, and we are affiliates there. So if you shop through our links, it does help us out here at Homestead and Chill, which we greatly appreciate. So thanks so much in advance. So this is our mainline tubing. This is 1/2-inch drip tubing. This is what we're going to use to run from the tap over to the beds, as well as up the sides of the beds to create a header that all the drip line will attach to, which is this stuff here. So this is 1/4-inch drip line. There are actually emitters installed in this stuff every 6 inches. It comes in a variety of different styles though. So there's ones that have emitters that are further spaced. These ones are 1/2 gallon an hour emitters, where there's ones that are 1/4, or I think they make 1 gallon an hour emitters. So you can kind of choose what works for yours. We like this 6-inch spacing though for our raised beds. Next is a hose timer. You don't have to automate your system again, but we really find this is handy. We can just set it for, a couple times a week, 45 minutes, whatever we want to run it at. And this timer has 2 outlets, which we can actually run 2 different drip systems on if we'd like to, which we have done in a few places in our property. And so this is a 4-in-1 faucet to drip adapter. You can buy these individual components and then string them together if you'd like. We just really like this 4-in-1 because it's really handy and it has all the pieces that we need to go from a tap to a drip system, including a filter that's in the end here, a backflow preventer so it doesn't allow anything from your drip system to get back into your potable water or house drinking water supply, a pressure reducer, which is absolutely vital for drip systems. They need to operate at around 25 to 30 psi max. Otherwise, too high of pressure can blow out all of your little sensitive components. And then at the end is actually where the drip tubing attaches to. So we're going to end up attaching this, which you'll see in a moment, right to the end of the hose timer there. Another thing that you can do, and this is totally optional, is add a hose splitter. And this would go to your hose bib, and then you could put your timer on this end so that you can still have access to your hose bib if you need to use it for filling watering cans or something like that, just not having a permanent system attached to your spigot if you'd still like access for that. So again, optional component there. Handy hole punch. So this is what we're going to be using to punch holes in our 1/2-inch drip tubing. We really like this one. It is very efficient compared to those little hand push punches, but those work as well. And then you'll probably need a variety of different couplers like this. So this is a T, this is a 90 or an elbow, so that you can run this 1/2-inch tubing to various places, alongside your beds, up into the bed, around the corner of the top of the bed when we create the header, which I'll show you next. So we're going to be using a variety of these in our system. And one note is there are different types of couplers. There are some that are called compression, where you just like shove the tubing into them. These ones we really like. They're Permalock, that you actually unscrew this back, push on the tubing, tubing and then screw it back over it. And that actually makes it reusable. You can take off the tubing and adjust it for repairs or whatever you need to do in the future, where those other ones are a little bit more permanent. So if you need to make changes or repairs, and you end up having to cut your tubing, which is kind of a pain in the butt to then piece it back together later. So we really like these Permalock couplers or adapters. This little guy here is a figure-8 clamp, is how we're going to end our 1/2-inch line. So this will come, and I'll show you that as we go, but that's what actually caps the line at the end to, end it so water doesn't come out the end. These little couplers are barbed couplers to connect your 1/4-inch tubing, and that works for, this emitter drip tubing or for solid 1/4-inch tubing, but that just goes in the end there, and then the other line goes into our 1/2-inch tubing. And then these little guys are called goof plugs, and that actually is what's going to go into the end of these lines to cap them and end those. It's just basically a solid plug, and you can also use those, as the name suggests, goof, to, if you make any mistakes in your 1/2-inch tubing, to actually plug those holes as well. Then the other guys are just, some scissors for cutting the 1/2-inch tubing, and the pliers, I find, make it really helpful and easy to push this stuff in, because sometimes it's a little bit hard to hold and push in with just your hands. And then we have some nice galvanized landscape staples that we're going to use to pin all of this stuff in place in the ground. Okay, so here is one of the headers. So this part is going to go inside of our grow bags. If you were doing raised beds, this would be your shorter side of your bed. So for example, like a 4x8, this would be the 4-foot section. And then these are going to run the length of your bed, the drip tubing. So again, if a 4x8 example, these would be 8 feet long, and this would be that 4 feet to sit inside the top of your bed. What we like to do is go and actually put one of these together inside the bed itself. So we brought all of our materials down into the grow bags, measured everything out, figured out how far we wanted to space these guys, which are about 8 inches apart, 9 inches apart, and then configured and assembled one that we can now use as like a master or a guide to make the other 8 up here on the patio, where it's nice and clean. It's a little easier to work, and we're not going to be worried about getting dirt or things into our drip line. So you want to be careful while you're working with this stuff. Do not get a bunch of dirt in there because they do clog or can clog easily if you don't. All right, so now that we know the size that we want for all the rest of the beds, I was able just to cut all of the parts in advance so I can just quickly assemble them. So I will show you that now. So here we have that 1/2-inch tubing, and on the first end here, this is one of those couplers where it's going to come up the side of the bed or grow bag and connect into here from the other main feed water supply. So with these, again, you make sure that that's screwed back to start. Push it on. It's a little cold, so it's tougher right now. Okay, so that is in all the way, and then you just screw this back down over it to tighten. Okay, so that's where the water is going to come into this header. Next, we're going to punch the holes about, I'm doing 8 or 9 inches apart to attach our drip tubing. So I'm just going to follow my guide and take the hole punch here and punch a hole. And while you're punching the holes, you want to make sure that they're going all kind of the same direction so that your drip tubing will all lie flat coming out of your header. Okay, so now I have all 5 of my holes punched so I can attach this drip tubing, but first I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end this line. So to do that, we just take one of these figure-8 clamps, and it goes over the tubing, and then you just fold the tubing back over itself and push it into the figure-8 and pull that back tight. So now that is ended and it's not going to leak. All right, and now it is time to add our drip tubing. So on one end, I'm going to take, with the assistance of some pliers here, that's that little barbed coupler, and just push that onto the end. And then I can take that other end and put it into the header like that. And then on its far end, I have one of these little goof plugs to end the line. and push that in, and that's the end of that. So then I'm just going to repeat that same process with the other 4 drip tube lines. All right, so now that we have all of those headers pre-assembled, we are ready to go ahead and run the main line to all these beds and get that installed. So we're going to connect to a tap or spigot that's over here just behind these chairs. So as you can see, it's pretty close to our beds or our irrigation site, maybe about 20 feet. So now is a good time to mention too that the general rule of thumb for this 1/2-inch irrigation tubing is to not run it much more than 100, maybe 200 feet maximum in order to maintain good pressure. So depending on the layout of your garden or where you're watering, you know, if things are spread into 2 areas or you're running a lot of pipe to a lot of different beds, it might be good to split up that system into 2 separate zones as needed that works for your project. And what I mean by splitting it up into a couple different zones would be either, you know, utilizing 2 different taps or using one of the hose timer that we have has 2 outlets. So running actually 2 different lines from that if needed to create 2 different zones you would water at different times to reduce the demand on each of those zones while they're running. So now we're just going to install these guys on the tap. Super simple. We just have our hose timer. I'm just going to thread that on. And again, this is where if you wanted to still be able to use this tap for something else, you could put in that hose splitter at the top up here first and then put on the hose timer. But we don't need this tap for anything else, so we're just doing the timer alone. Got that on, and then now is our 4-in-1. That is the filter, backflow, pressure reducer, and the component that actually screws on or connects to the drip tubing, which is next. So I already have this guy threaded back, and then this just shoves on, and this is a permalock fitting like the others, which means it can come off later and be adjusted or repaired as needed rather than a real permanent compression fitting. So I shove that on all the way, screw that back over itself to tighten, and now we're ready to run this main line over to the beds. Okay, so now the main water supply is coming down the line in between the beds. So essentially it came from our tap over there, and we just ran it down under this fence and then created with a series of T's right here, kind of a main header that's all along the top row, and then a line that goes down behind each row of beds. And so the next step that we're going to do is go ahead and in the main line, cut in and add a T and a riser, and then those headers that we pre-made to go in each of these beds. But before we do that, now is a good time to go ahead and flush our system with water to remove any debris or dirt or anything that might have got into the lines before we actually add the drip components, because the drip components can potentially clog if there is dirt and debris in there. So for now, we just left these ends open. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the water line, flush the water out, and then we'll go ahead and install the drip parts. And there it is, getting flushed. Flushed. Now we know we have water before we actually put the drip on too. right, so we just finished getting this whole thing set up, and I just turned it on for the first time so we can see the drip in action. But yeah, there are a lot of like variations you can do to make this look even neater. So if you were working with traditional, wooden raised beds, you could always run these risers down under the side of your bed and up inside the bed so that it's a little bit more hidden. As you can see, we left ours a little bit high because we have the sides of these grow bags rolled down right now. So just in case we ever want to top off and, fill the soil a little bit more, I left them kind of high just so we had some wiggle room to raise the soil level if we want to. Let's take a look at the drippers. You can see them right here, dripping away. And so one of the neat things about this type of system too, with this kind of tubing, so if we have a 1/2 gallon per hour emitters, and we counted how many emitters are actually in each of these beds, there are 28 per bed. So that means if we run it for an hour, the bed is getting 14 gallons per hour. So we don't necessarily have to run it for that full hour, but that is how we would do that kind of math to assess how much water it's getting. And then another modification that you can do for raised beds that we actually did in our main raised bed garden over on the other side over there is install a shutoff valve for every bed. And so even this 1/2 inch line tubing has some little inline valves. It's just like a little on-off switch like that that you could do coming up the side or in the top of your header, wherever it kind of fits in your configuration. But that way, if you wanted to, you could control each individual bed, either turning it off or dialing that shutoff valve by like half to reduce the flow by half. Right now, we're pretty much going to be running these beds all the same rate. They have similar water needs for the plants, and we plan on using all of the beds almost year round. So we didn't add shutoff valves for every single bed in this case, but we did do that in our raised bed garden because we have 19 raised beds over there, and sometimes we're not using all of those at once. And then of course you could always cover these lines that are on the ground in wood chips or bark or even gravel, bury them under the soil by a few inches if you want to hide them more. This is just what we have set up for now. Maybe one day we'll redo this space with some different ground cover, but I am overall very happy with how this turned out. All right, friends, and it's as simple as that. So I hope you found today's video to be informative and empowering so you feel confident going forward to install your own DIY drip irrigation system in raised beds in your space. And if so, give us a thumbs up and a like and subscribe, follow along for more videos, and definitely check us out on our website, homesteadandchill.com, for even more gardening tips and tricks. But if you've seen our other drip videos, you've now come to realize that there are so many different configurations and options for drip irrigation. You could take headers like this to irrigate in-ground garden beds. You could hook them up in a more permanent situation with PVC and valves, all kinds of options. So again, thanks for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time.